Your grandparents were probably married for many, many years. They stayed together through the thick and thin, raised kids, and built a life together. And if you asked them whether they were happy, they would probably say something along the lines of most of the time. But if you looked at their marriage by modern standards, it would seem kind of terrible. Your grandfather probably did not change many diapers or do that many dishes. And your grandma probably gave up on career ambitions to raise kids. They might not have been each other's best friends, and they probably didn't have long conversations about their feelings at the end of every day. By our metrics, their marriage was mediocre at best. And yet, statistically, they were more satisfied with their marriages than we are with ours. We have marriages that look better on paper than any previous generation. More equality, communication, freedom, and if things aren't working, we have the right to leave. We have addressed so many of these structural problems that made marriage an oppressive state, especially for women. And somehow, people are reporting being less happy in their marriages than they were when those problems still existed. Divorce rates are climbing every year, and many people are avoiding marriage entirely. And those who do marry often describe feeling vaguely disappointed, like they are failing at something that they cannot quite articulate. So, what are we getting wrong about what marriage actually is? Well, let's start by looking at what marriage used to provide versus what we expect it to provide now. For most of human history, marriage was fundamentally an economic and social arrangement. You married to create a stable household unit, produce and raise children, and to pool resources and labor together to make life a little easier. Romantic love was nice if it happened, but it was not the foundation of everything. The marriage's success was measured by whether it fulfilled practical functions. Did you survive or raise children who survived? Did you maintain social standing? The expectations were pretty clear and limited. Your spouse was your economic partner, your co parent, and your social unit. You were not expecting them to be your soulmate or your therapist or even your best friend. These roles were filled by other people, like extended family members, friends, and community organizations. Marriage was one component of a fuller life, but not the entirety of it. But now, look at what we expect marriage to provide today. Your spouse is supposed to be your best friend, your passionate lover, your co parent, and in some cases, even your business partner, your therapist, and your adventure companion. And a lot of people are expecting their spouses to be their emotional support system without having anybody outside of their household that can take on the burden of doing that as well. Your partner, according to today's metrics, is supposed to be the person that makes you feel seen and understood at the deepest possible level. We have essentially taken all of the functions that used to be distributed across an entire community: friendship, emotional support, intellectual stimulation, and spiritual growth, and we have placed them on the shoulders of one singular person. And then we're surprised when they can't carry the weight on their own. Elaine de Botton talks about how Romanticism fundamentally changed our conception of what marriage should be. We inherited from 18th and 19th century literature this idea that marriage should be the accumulation of passionate love, and that your spouse should complete you, whatever that means. And that finding the one means finding someone who fulfills every need that you have. This is actually a fairly recent invention in human history, and it has created expectations that are almost impossible to meet. Kierkegaard distinguished between what he called the aesthetic and the ethical life. Now, I'm bringing this up because it is important when we're discussing the roles of marriages. You see, the aesthetic life is governed by feelings, or the pursuit of novelty and intensity and passion. It's about keeping your options open, experiencing everything, and never committing to anything that might close off other possibilities. By contrast, the ethical life is about commitment, duty, and responsibility, and choosing one thing and accepting that this choice means giving up other things. Romantic love, the thing that brings most people to marriage, is fundamentally aesthetic. It is governed by feelings that are intense precisely because they are new and uncertain. The butterflies in your stomach, the obsessive thinking about the other person, and the sense that this relationship is special and unique. But all of this is driven by novelty and uncertainty. This is what falling in love feels like, and it can be a wonderful experience. But the problem is that we have built an entire cultural narrative around the idea that marriage should be a continuation of this aesthetic intensity. But marriage, by its nature, is ethical rather than aesthetic. It is a commitment that persists regardless of how you feel on any given day. It is literally written into the vows, for better or for worse, for sicker or for poor. Being married is not about being in love on a constant basis. It is simply choosing one person and accepting that this means you are not choosing other people. And you are choosing to build a life together through the mundane accumulation of shared experiences, most of which are not particularly intense or romantic. It's doing dishes and paying bills and figuring out whose turn it is to take out the trash. The feelings that characterize falling in love do not naturally persist in long-term commitments. It's like having a baby and watching that child grow from a newborn to an infant to a toddler. There are highs and lows every day. The intensity and new love is particularly driven by uncertainty and novelty, both when it comes to marriage and children. And marriage, by definition, reduces both. Once you have committed, there is less uncertainty. When you've been together for years, there's not a whole lot of novelty. The aesthetic feelings that brought you to marriage will naturally diminish over time. And we interpret this as failure rather than as the predictable transition from one phase of a relationship to another. We expect marriage to maintain the intensity of falling in love while also providing the stability and comfort of long-term commitment. We want the butterflies and the deep security. We want the excitement of discovering someone new and the comfort of being with someone who also knows you completely. And while these aren't necessarily contradictory, they are in tension with each other. And we rarely acknowledge that tension. Instead, when the feelings do change, as they inevitably will, we assume something is wrong with the other person or with us. But there is another layer to this. Not only do we expect more from marriage than previous generations did, but we also have more options. Barry Schwartz wrote about the paradox of choice, or the idea that having too many options does not make us happier. Instead, it makes us less satisfied with whatever we chose, because we are constantly aware of the alternatives that we gave up. In previous generations, your pool of potential spouses was very limited, not just by geography, but social class, religion, and family connections. You married someone from your town, probably from your social circle, and someone that your family approved of. And the limited options actually made choosing a lot easier. You picked the best option from a small set of possibilities and you moved forward. Now, at least in theory, you can marry anyone. Dating apps promise you hundreds of potential matches. You can meet people from across the country or the world. And social class boundaries are not as rigid. Religious requirements have been very loosened, and your family's approval matters less and less. The pool of potential partners has expanded exponentially, and in theory, this should make people happier because more choices means better matches. But Schwartz research actually suggests the opposite. When you have too many options, two things happen. First, you have a harder time making a decision because you are paralyzed by the awareness of everything you might be missing. Second, once you do make a decision, you are much less satisfied with it because you keep wondering whether one of the other options might have been a little better. And this shows up in modern marriage in very insidious ways. You marry someone, but you are constantly aware that there are other people out there who might be a little better. Every time your spouse does something a little annoying, you think about all of the people who probably wouldn't do that kind of thing. Every time you have a conflict, you wonder whether this is a normal conflict to have, and if you were with somebody else, would this naturally resolve easier? The marriage might be genuinely good, but you cannot fully appreciate it because you are comparing it to infinite alternatives. And social media has made this so much worse. You don't just compare your spouse to a hypothetical alternative. You are literally comparing your entire marriage to the curated highlight reel of everyone else's marriages. You might scroll through YouTube Shorts or TikTok and see couples who seem deliriously happy, who take amazing vacations and never fight, and whose kids are always clean and smiling, and their houses are always so tidy. But what you're seeing is always a performance. The couple posting about their perfect date night might have screamed at each other in the car on the way there. The family with a beautiful Christmas photo might barely be holding it together. And we see this all the time. There are a lot of famous internet couples who were always smiling and playing pranks on one another and gaining a social media following. And then 5 or 6 years later, they are divorced because somebody cheated on the other person, meaning their relationship was just as hard as everybody else's. But you were watching them and thinking, that could be me, because you just see the performance of happiness and you compare it to your messy reality of your own marriage. And now you are not just aware of the people that you could have married, but also aware of the other people's marriages that seem better and easier than yours. Your spouse forgets about your birthday and you get naturally upset because just a couple weeks ago you saw where a TikTok husband threw his wife an amazing birthday party. Your kid might not be doing too well in school, and you feel like a failed parent because you see all of the homeschool moms talking about how brilliant their kids are. The comparison is endless and exhausting. And the cruel irony is that this constant comparison makes you less able to appreciate what you actually have. Your marriage might actually be good, and your spouse might be a loving and faithful person just trying their best. But we are so busy comparing them to an idealized version of what marriage could be that we can't see what's actually in front of us. So, why were your grandparents more satisfied with marriages that look worse by our standards? Well, I think they understood something that we might have forgotten. Marriage is not supposed to fulfill every human need that you have. It is supposed to fulfill very specific needs, like partnership, stability, and family formation. And other needs get met in other ways. Your grandmother probably had close friendships that provided the emotional intimacy and understanding, and your grandfather probably had buddies that he did activities with. They both had extended family, community involvement, religious communities, and social clubs. Of course, marriage was important, but it wasn't everything. The pressure on the marriage was lower because other relationships were meeting other needs. And we've done something very strange. We have reduced the importance of all of these other relationships and placed all of that weight on marriage. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have love or passion or romance in your marriage. It just means that philosophically, it is not healthy to place the burden of all of your emotional needs, physical needs, and economic needs on one person, even if that person is your life partner. So, if you want a happier marriage, lower the expectations on that person, including yourself. We don't have to be everything to another person. Because if you try to be everything all at once for one other person, you're going to crack under the pressure. And somebody is going to make the decision to leave. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see y'all next time.